Yo! Welcome back to One More Mana. My name's Derek, and today we are getting into sort of a Theros themed deck tech, and it's going to involve the most recent Secret Lair came out with all the constellation art, the just beautiful works of art done by Jason Engel for the new Secret Lair with all the Theros gods, the original Theros gods. Super exciting, and there is one set in particular I'm a little extra excited about, one set of three. And with these Theros gods, it inspired me to take a look back at an old deck I used to play and put them all in there. Because there's one set of three in one of those secret layers that really does speak to a very specific commander for me. We're going to get to that in just 1 second, but if you want to get any cards in this deck tech, especially some of these beautiful Constellation Theros gods, head down to our affiliate link down below with TCG Player. TCG Player is absolutely amazing. You're going to be able to find anything that you want on there. Any cards you get with that link below will help support the channel, help us get out more and better content. We really do appreciate the help. So getting back into what I alluded to before, basically all of the sets of these secret layers are broken down into 3 Theros gods, and it seemed like they were just strictly based on color identity and everything, but there was one in particular that I really felt synergized together that I did pick up that I feel like is just asking to be put into a specific commander's deck. That commander is Kresh the Bloodbraided, and maybe just based off of that you'll be able to know what set that it was. But that was, I believe it was set number 5 was the number. We won't worry about numbers. It was the secret layer with Nylea, Xenagos, and Farrakha. These 3 cards are absolutely perfect for a Kresh deck, and when I looked at them and I picked it, one, Xenagos is my boy. I just love Xenagos. And 2, the Farrakha art was freaking perfect. Just a little aside about the arts, Jason Engel just did a freaking amazing job. He might be one of my favorite Magic artists. The guy, I met him at Magic Fest Atlanta last year. Awesome guy, and I didn't realize how many of the cards he's done art for are among my favorite pieces of art in Magic. It was just awesome. The art on all of these Theros gods were just absolutely just beautiful, and Farrakha might just be my favorite of the bunch. But yes, all 3 of these cards just yelled Kresh to me. And while maybe it's not immediately apparent, we'll get into that throughout the deck tech. At the end, I'm still going to go ahead and do the game-winning step, but I want to have a little mini aside, kind of talking about why all these gods are so perfect for this deck. So I'm going to go ahead and do the deck tech first, so we can get an understanding of how the deck's going to work and how it runs, and then we'll see why these gods are just so perfect for a Kresh deck. For anyone who is not familiar with Kresh the Bloodbraided, Kresh is 2 in Jund, so red, black, green, for a 3/3 with some very fun text on it, and it says whenever any creature dies, your creatures, opponent creatures, token creatures, non-token creatures, doesn't matter whose creatures, when they die, it gets X +1/+1 counters, where X is that creature's power. Now, we're playing Commander. Stuff gets big, especially if someone's got some crazy token effects where they got tons of tokens and they buff them and you can manage to pull off some shenanigans to kill them. Yeah, Kresh gets huge. It's something I really underestimated. I always have been intrigued by Kresh, but the text always made me think it's not going to be worth the trouble to just get a big vanilla creature. But he gets real big, and there's a big difference because some of the power payoff, I've done quite a few decks at this point that have cared about Powers Matters cards. Kresh is one of the best at taking advantage of that because he just gets so big so consistently. We're going to start with the creatures in this deck, and the creatures really fulfill a lot of very important categories for us. Now, we're going to have a lot of synergies going on. There's going to be a +1 counter sub-theme because Kresh gets +1 counters. There's going to be a very heavy Edict effect theme where we're trying to get everybody to just sacrifice creatures, including ourselves, to throw +1 counters. And then we want to take advantage of the fact that there's just a crap ton of +1 counters on Kresh and the fact that he's going to be this huge power creature. So kind of going down the line, +1 counter synergies first, we're going to run stuff like Corpsejack Menace. Doubling +1 counters seems amazing, especially when creature's already going to be big. If you kill somebody's 10/10, all of a sudden just throw them 20 +1 counters on Kresh seems pretty good. Another +1 counter effect that is amazing is going to be Rayhan, because Rayhan is going to serve as kind of a backup where if someone can just target and kill Kresh, or if we sacrifice Kresh to a number of amazing effects that we have to take advantage of that power, we can just throw the +1 counters somewhere else and still have a massive creature. We also want to have huge creatures ourselves that can have massive power for really efficient mana costs. So stuff like Grothama is great, 5 mana for a 10 power creature. Beautiful, with the upside of being able to use Kresh to draw a ton of cards with it. Stuff like Realm Seekers is amazing in Commander because you play it, you get just a massive creature. People's hands get out of control in Commander. I think the smallest, Realm Seekers is always going to be at least a 10 cent, and that's very, unless someone's playing some crazy discard theme, it's being very, very modest about how crazy Realm Seekers' power and toughness is going to be, with the upside of being able to tutor for lands, because when we get to it, there's some important lands in the deck as well. Realm Seekers is great. And then the other just really cheap mana cost creature with huge power is going to be Lord of Extinction. I alluded to it before with the beautiful artwork. Some of the invocations were kind of hard to tell what was going on in the art because of the frames. Lord of Extinction, I think, with the frame and everything, just looks perfect. I love this card so much. And in this deck, it is right at home because people's graveyards fill up. There are so many graveyard themed decks in the format at this point, or graveyard synergizing decks. Graveyards fill up. People want stuff in the graveyard because it's just so easy to access. And a card like this takes huge advantage of it because it just comes in massive, especially if you drop this late game. You can either, with Kresh or even with some of the unique effects in the deck, really take people out with this card, and we'll get into how we'll take advantage of that in a second. Now we want creatures that are going to cost stuff to die. And the ones that kind of do the best job of just doing this in mass are going to be Fleshbag Marauder, Merciless Executioner, Plague Crafter, kind of that type of stuff. And the reason it's so good is, one, it comes in, we get to sack something. And then each opponent, as long as they have a creature, has to sack something. And this adds up fast, because even if everyone just has a little 2/2 on board, seems kind of insignificant. But that is 8+1 counters being thrown onto Kresh. 3 mana for some of these to go ahead and get 8+1 counters thrown on when we have these power mana synergies is huge. And if you just get so lucky and someone's playing Voltron or someone only has a massive creature on board, you're getting a whole lot more than that. And in addition, it works to control the board. It's just, there's so many payoffs for these cards, and these are really the stars of the deck. These are really what is going to work to build our forces up and keep our opponents in control at the exact same time. And then the last creature I'm going to mention is kind of like our little mini general. He's kind of a backup Kresh if everything else goes poorly, and it's going to be Yahenni, Undying Partisan. Yahenni's awesome. Yahenni is just amazing. They are one of the just most interesting creatures to me because it's a sack outlet. It can get indestructible. It has haste, and it also allows us to throw +1 counters. In some strange ways, it's like a safer version of Kresh. It doesn't have the explosive payoff with 30+1 counters in one turn, but you got haste and you can give them indestructible. And that is just phenomenal. They are one of my favorite cards in the deck, and it is a card specifically that has always intrigued me as a commander, and being able to play it as like the little lieutenant in here is tons of fun. And just at the very base level, having them as an indestructible sack outlet is beautiful because we need our creatures to die. If someone tries to exile something or bounce something, we would rather sack it so we can get those +1 counters on Kresh and get death triggers. So this is a great way to basically guarantee that we're going to have access to that at all times. With the artifacts, 2 equipment in here. Now you can go more equipment heavy because it is kind of Voltron-ish if you build it certain ways, but there's only 2 that I put in here and they are just ridiculous. We're going to put Mage Slayer in here because if someone has no blockers, this just doubles the damage. And if they do have blockers, they're getting smacked in the face anyway. This is a beautiful card, and it's one of those that allows us to force damage through. It's phenomenal. And the other one's going to be Virak Battlehorns. Virak Battlehorns is, I put this in a lot of decks, or I've started to, because it's just such a dumb effect. Like, only one thing can block a creature, and it gets trampled. It's very cheap to play, cheap to equip. If you have any deck that has big creatures, this is amazing. Because you're going to make opponents really start making some tough decisions because they don't want to take damage, and they're going to have to start basically chump blocking with some of their bigger creatures or just get basically smacked in the face. With the enchantments, no surprise here, we do have Grave Pact and Dictative Erebos. There's a lot of decks that these cards can be a little bit oppressive in and kind of make it less fun for the table. The thing I love about this is we're not just getting rid of people's stuff for the sake of it. We're not just trying to control the board and not let anyone play. We're trying to build our threat. So when we're making people sack stuff, we are actively moving towards our win con. It's not just killing stuff to kill stuff for small value. This is, you can get into chains with these where we're sacking stuff and killing other people's stuff, and by the end of it, you got 40+1 counters on Kresh, and everyone is looking terrified at this monster when there's nothing else on the board. These do a great job in this deck. If they're a little mean, you can kind of stick with the Plague Crafters and those of the world because they're one-time effects, but if your play group is okay with stuff like this, definitely throw them in. Another one that is just zero surprise, and I've put this in so many decks, it's greater good, If you have any deck with a commander that has decently high power, any creatures with decently high power, put Greater Good in there. Even in decks that are graveyard synergizing, it just gives you a discard outlet and a sack outlet. This card is just phenomenal. Sack outlets in general, you want them in every deck, and it's just 4 mana is not that much mana when considering what you get out of this. Even if you only have 3/3s in your deck, you can literally do this triple card loot situation and have that sack outlet. Every deck I run this in, I don't feel any better than when I have it on the board, because I just feel like, you know what, board wipe me. Because I'm just going to go sift through a whole bunch of my deck, decide what I want in my hand, and set me up for the rest of the game. No surprise, not breaking any news about how powerful this card is, but I really do think it should be in more decks. It is amazing. Another just absolute all-star in this deck is Rite of the Raging Storm. Everyone's turn they get a 5/1 that can't attack you. And at the end step, they have to sack that 5/1. Just phenomenal, because 1, you get people attacking each other, and 2, even if they're kind of onto your plan and they don't want to be swinging out causing other people's creatures to die, regardless, they're sacking that 5/1 on their end step. If this makes it 1 round to the table with Kresh, that is 20 +1/+1 counters thrown on Kresh. It is just a ridiculous card, and if people get into the excitement of wanting to swing at people, those chump blockers and stuff also are dying, giving you more and more +1 counters. This card has been involved in some of the most explosive turns I've ever had in Kresh. This with some of the doubling of +1 counters or some of the other killing effects or edict type effects. You can literally get your commander from a 3/3 to a 30/30, 40/40 in 1 round to the table, and this really enables a lot of our craziest synergies. And then I always talk about redundancies. You always want redundancies. We've talked about Rayhan that kind of sets up redundancies. We've talked about Yahenni as a lieutenant in the deck. Another one that gives us these redundant effects is Death's Presence. Death's Presence is amazing. It essentially turns all your creatures into Kresh. Because whenever a creature dies that you control, you just get to throw +1 counters on another creature equal to its power. Now this is only for creatures you control, so not perfect, not exactly Kresh, but it still does a great job of protecting you, because people will try to kill Kresh. Cards like this are why having so many sack outlets is so important in this deck, because people are going to try to bounce your commander. People will try to exile your commander. You need to be able to make sure your commander dies, so stuff like this will go ahead and trigger, and you can throw those +1 counters elsewhere. It's a super powerful card. It's very expensive mana-wise, and you probably play more efficient cards in the slot, but I've had a ton of fun with it when I've gotten it out. And it can even turn some loops that you can get going where you sack a creature with huge power, get benefit, and all of a sudden you have another huge creature, sack that, and you can get in some crazy situations. And with the sorceries, we're going to run that normal Powers Matter package. I feel like this is like a weekly occurrence now because I do love big dumb stuff. We're going to run stuff like Traverse the Outlands. We're going to run stuff like Life's Legacy and stuff like Rishkar's Expertise. There's a number of these cards in the deck, and they are phenomenal. It makes sure that even if we just have a massive vanilla creature and the board's too stalled to swing with, we can still get huge benefit from having our massive commander. Now, in addition in this slot, we're going to run a lot of fling type effects. We want stuff that allows us to reach out and just throw damage at people, because most of the time our commander is just this big vanilla monster. Like, we can't do much. If someone can literally just have a 1/1 human, we can have our 100 Kresh, but if we have no way to get that damage through, they're just blocking with it. I literally had a game with Kresh one time where, no exaggeration, my Kresh was a 300 something, and I couldn't get through and kill them because I couldn't draw into one of these effects. And every turn, someone was making little 1/1s to chump with. Flavor-wise, I thought it was hilarious because I'm just picturing this massive, just like roided out Kresh ready to smash someone's face. You got this little scared dude just getting his face beat in and somehow protecting the player from getting hit at all. It was frustrating, and as I've played the deck, I put more and more of these effects in because Kresh doesn't need help getting big, but he will need a lot of help getting damage through. Now, these are spread throughout the sorceries and the instance, so we do have stuff like Flesh and Blood. We have Essence Harvest, which is beautiful because Essence Harvest can actually get around things like Glacial Chasm as well, because it causes a loss of life. Super important text, so I'd love to have that in there. And a couple more in the sorcery slot we might get to in that game-winning step. But these cards are phenomenal, and you're going to see some more in the instance slot as well. The very last sorcery I'm going to mention is just one of those cards that hits everything we need, and I always get really excited when I find cards that synergize this well, and it's Victimize. We have a deck where a lot of creatures will be dying, so Graveyard Recursion isn't bad to have. It's very useful, because since we're killing everything, it's just easier to get it back. But a card like Victimize, what it's going to allow us to do is not only get creatures back from the graveyard, but sack creatures as well. So we get to sack something, throw +1 counters onto Kresh, and bring creatures back all in one 3-mana spell. Now in the instants are my favorite part of this deck. There's not many of them, but they all are so perfect. And it gives us instant speed removal to kill creatures, some edict effects to kill creatures, and then fling spells to smash people in the face. Obviously fling itself, where the phrase comes from, Soul's Fire, all of these cards just allow us to throw damage straight at people when our commander gets huge, which is so important. And then instant speed removal is also huge, because this will allow us to get our commander on command. Whenever we decide we want it to get bigger, we can do that, because we can kill something at instant speed, get those +1 counters over. And there's a number of times that will be useful to get in for sneak kills when someone feels safe and they no longer are. They double as combat tricks in this deck, which is awesome. With the lands, there are 3 I'd have to point out that you need to run in the deck. First one's Rogue's Passage. It's just so easy to get Kresh above a 21/21, and if you give it unblockable, it's just a player dead right there. It is phenomenal. Another one, no surprise, like I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, every deck that has Gruul, put Kessig Wolf Run in there, and especially decks that synergize as well as this one. It gives our commander trample, that evasion it needs. Really, most of the time, pumping Kresh won't matter because he's just so damn big, but when it does matter, you can pump him as well. And the last one is Skarg the Rage Pits. It's more trample. We're going to have this massive commander get stuff in your land slot that synergizes, so it's basically a free slot in the deck to get the effects you need. Now, there are 2 more lands that are a little on the expensive side, a little harder to get a hold of, that you want in the deck if you can get access to them. Now, one is going to be Yavimaya Hollow. This card is reserve list, but thankfully it's on the cheaper end sort of reserve list cards. It's phenomenal, and you can pay a green and tap it to regenerate a target creature. Because of the way Regenerate works, when someone would destroy him, he doesn't leave the battlefield, meaning he gets to keep his +1 counters. An effect like this is so important to protect you from board wipes, because if he would die and all of a sudden a board wipe happens, you regenerate him, all of a sudden he's just getting +1 counters piled on top of him. It just synergizes so well. If you can get a hold of it, it is an all-star in the deck, and it really helps you to feel a little bit safer. It's a good way to protect your commander. The other one is Phyrexian Tower, because it is a sack outlet on a land. High Market does a great job of the same effect. Ideally, run both, but if not, at least have one of those in there, because again, free slot essentially for your lands. Getting a sack outlet is so important. All right, that's going to do it for all the categories. Let's get into how we're going to win the game in this deck. Now, the best way to win the game is with 2 cards, and I'm going to make it a nice quick game winning step so we can get into those gods again. And those 2 cards are going to be Chandra's Ignition and Jarad Golgari Lichlord. These allow us to just drain everyone at once. If we got our commander big enough, Jarad makes people lose life. Gets around Glacial Chasm, gets around any type of fog effects or any type of stuff opponents can have. Jarad is just beautiful in the deck, and a number of other massive creatures we have. I mentioned that Death's Presence earlier. You can get into loops where you use Jarad to sack creatures, throw the +1 counters, sack another creature, throw the +1 counters, and you probably don't need to do all that because everyone will already be dead, but just overkill. Do it anyway. And then the next one I mentioned was Chandra's Ignition. Get Kresh massive, play Chandra's Ignition, blow up the world, and have a good time. Even if you can't kill everybody because it's dealing damage to every other creature, you can deal a bunch of damage to everyone, kill everyone's creatures, get more +1 counters on Kresh, and just have a party. These are 2 of the most fun cards of the deck. This deck is kind of obvious in how you're going to win. You're going to have a huge commander, you're going to fling stuff, you're going to swing stuff, and you're going to have a good time. Now those gods, why they are so important in this deck, and maybe it started to become more apparent, we'll start with Nylea. Very simple. It gives stuff trample, and because our commander has no evasion, giving stuff trample is so needed, and the fact we can put it on an indestructible enchantment, hopefully that won't be a creature, because we don't want it to be removed, it's just permanent trample essentially, and it's beautiful in this deck, and it's what we need. Xenagos, power matters. We can pump either Kresh if we get a chance to give him any evasion, smack someone in the face because double of whatever he is more than enough to kill somebody, or we can double the power and toughness of our other creatures, use our various sack outlets, and just pile counters onto Kresh. Again, indestructible enchantment. When I played Kresh, both Nylea and Xenagos were already in the deck, and they were some of the all-stars. They just stick around so much, especially because Kresh himself is so easy to have removed. 0 protection. Having some of these key pieces, being able to just stay on the board is so useful and so crucial, and they are stars in the deck. Farrakha now was a card I didn't initially have in my original Kresh deck, and it's something I have since added because it is just way too perfect. Again, indestructible enchantment. It's going to stick around, so we're always going to have access to it. But the thing I love so much about it is it helps us deal with our own edict effects and in a number of ways. For one, if we have this out and we don't have any creatures that we want to sack at that time, if everything's too important and we do want to use one of our sack outlets, well, great. We can just go ahead, exile something from a graveyard, get a 1/1 snake, and immediately have sack fodder. That is beautiful. But what's also awesome is if we're trying to play a political game, and let's say we're working together with somebody for a bigger threat, it's tough when you have a bunch of edict effects and you're just screwing everyone over because they can't keep a creature on board. What Farrakha is going to allow you to do is give people 1/1s to sack. We're still getting some benefit. We're getting a little bit of +1 counters, but the most important part is it allows you to stay on people's good sides politically within the game in a deck that otherwise really doesn't get to do that much. Farrakha just seems like an auto-include in the deck now looking back, because I ran stuff like Bitter Blossom and different things like that for sack outlets. I feel like Farrakha just does an even better job because it gives you that chance to play a political game. Amazing card. And these cards just seem, literally, if I had to pick the top maybe 10 most important cards in this deck, I think all 3 of these would land in there. And that is insane to have them all in the same secret lair, and kind of awesome. That's going to do it for this week's deck tech. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys are excited to get these reprints of the gods, because some of those gods got pretty expensive and it seems like the prices are dropping a little bit, which always makes me happy. If y'all have never had any experience with Kresh in the past, it is a super fun deck to play, and it actually creates fun situations at the table. When I first built this deck, I was definitely concerned it was going to be a little bit too mean and oppressive for the decks I like to play, but in practice it ended up being a lot more fun. You do have a lot of removal, a lot of edict effects, but it's not to the point where no one can keep a board. It's usually just enough to keep stuff in control and get your Kresh huge. Super fun deck, and yeah, if you've never given them a try, definitely recommend it. As always, a huge shout out to all the patrons. We love and appreciate y'all so much. Tons of exciting content to come, tons of exciting stuff to come. Korea is still laying out on the horizon, just waiting to throw some more fatties at us. And as someone who just, loves these big dumb creatures, I cannot wait. But until then, I will see y'all next time.